let's go ahead and get started. Can you see the handouts in the chat? Go ahead and open those up. You should have one that says broker chat and one that says broker call handout. One is the copy of the changes we're going to talk about, and the other one is the handout of the slides.
I cannot see them in the chat. Sorry, my voice is yeah, I cannot.
Okay. And then what about the there should
scroll
be
up
two.
a little bit and you'll see it in the chat. You just have to scroll up.
Yeah. If you just joined us, you might have to.
Yes, maybe because I just joined.
Yeah, so scroll up and you'll see it. You can open that up.
I don't see anything.
Okay, I know he
If
put
you
it in there
scroll
because I
up
can.
in the meeting chat, it's there. There's two PDFs. One says broker call handout June 2024. The other says broker chat June 2024.
Hey, Zena,
Someone just
I
sent it
joined
again.
Zena, I joined when you did, and it just took a minute for them to load.
I just saw them. Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to switch over to the screen so we can get started. All right, so many of you know tomorrow, for those of you that are from our Midtown location, we will be going into a little more detailed discussion on this, since this is only an hour broker chat. For those of you that have not had the pleasure of joining broker chat, this is held every other Monday each month by either myself, Angie, or Tom. And we usually will have a topic that we're seeing a lot of problems with from our compliance or from just broker questions and different things that are happening quite often in the office. I think last time you had broker chat, I believe earnest money was discussed. And so this time, because our new mid-year contracts start July 1st, so everything that you're using now is grandfathered. However, July 1st, you will have no choice but to start using the new 24 contracts. Okay. And there have been a few changes. My name is Deborah Blue. I am the managing broker in the Midtown location and part of the heart of Atlanta. So let's get started. So we're going to talk about like 5 general things that are going to happen. They've rewritten our forms to comply with what happened during the NAR settlement. We all know that they settled and everything will go into effect for them August 17th. But for now, in Georgia, we're talking about how those changes reflect with us. And so far, I've had the pleasure of taking 2 classes already on this to get different perspective from different instructors. I usually try to take 2 or 3 so that I have a good, clear understanding as to what's going on. I like to break it down for you in baby pieces because it is something new for all of us. I've been doing this for 28 years and I have to rethink the way that I'll do some business based on these changes. Almost all of the changes have to do with compensation. So if you're thinking the entire 500 pages of contracts that we have change, no. Most of the things that have to do with representation and compensation, that's all you have to focus on. Everything else pretty much is the same. Nothing requires you, the agent, to reduce your commission. I want you to understand some basic things and general things before we start diving into it. If you are someone who's running a business and your typical commission for your business is 3%, there's nothing wrong with saying that. What you cannot say is it's standard, it can't be reduced, and so on and so forth. In Georgia, it has always been negotiable. This lawsuit came from other states that don't have the type of contracts that we have that are written very well. They've always been negotiable. Compensation has always been negotiable. I want you to also remember that you will probably have to change your language, just as I have to. We are so used to saying commission, but you're going to need to learn to start saying compensation. And the reason for that is because we're compensated in many ways. It could be a retainer fee. It could be a commission or compensation from a lease or things of that nature, referral fee. Those are all forms of compensation. So the NAR settlement required that each brokerage engagement, that's tenant, seller, buyer, compensation agreements, and customers, we must disclose our compensation. And we've always done that. And they're always negotiable, as I've said before. Now, one thing I've mentioned for those of you that are regulars, I use the customer agreement quite a bit working with investors, but I had decided not to do that before I saw the changes, and I was going to use the non-exclusive. However, they have made changes to the customer agreement. We won't be going over that in this 1-hour chat, but I will be going over that in detail tomorrow with the panel. There'll be four of us, three of us, four of us on that panel tomorrow. I forget how many. So the mid-year changes, the GAR Forms Committee felt this statement along with was confusing as far as telling people how commissions or compensation was formulated. And so they added language in there that you will see, and I'll point that out. When you're negotiating your compensation, they've added in the body of our forms, this does not obligate any individual licensee to negotiate their commission. You can say no to that person. This is, what I typically charge. And if that is not what you want to do, then we're probably going to have to figure out another way, or I might not be the right agent for you. So I want you to remember that, because I think a lot of people have a little heartburn about this, that, I'm not going to make any money. So the mid-year form changes, the word commission was changed to compensation for professional services throughout the body of the contract. So everywhere you used to see the word commission, you'll see compensation for professional services. Let's hope everyone's giving professional services. That's before the contracts came out. Our conversation was a lot about value. What is the value you're bringing to that client, to that customer, for them to justify the compensation that you're asking them to pay, or you're asking the buyer to pay, or the seller to pay. So just keep that in mind. Now, this has always been part of our contracts, part of the rules of license law, that you must have a written agreement. Some of us have gotten away with writing the contract the same day and getting the buyer to fill out the buyer's brokerage engagement or customer engagement at the same time. You cannot. Let me say that for the people in the back. You cannot do that any longer. You must have a written agreement. So if you're in an appointment or a consultation and you're explaining your value, the best way to explain this is to say, by law, I must have a written agreement for you to hire me. I've always said that in every CITO. CITO for me means come into the office. We don't do that too much anymore. But whatever your consultation program is or platform, you need to be able to say, this is how we work. You may even say, I'll give you a freebie, but you must have a written agreement in order to show any type of property. Okay? Any questions so far? You can unmute yourself and let me know, or raise your hand. Probably better to just unmute and yell, because I don't have help telling me who's on hand up. All right, so I don't see any hands.
So
I'm going to keep going.
I have a question. So if I met them last week, and I showed them houses today, and they wanted to submit an offer. So I didn't sign them the buyer's brokerage agreement. So I'm signing it today. Should I put today's date or last week's date?
Yes. Yeah, I personally think when you started working with them is when you should do it. Because technically you're backwards here on this. So if you started working with them last week, I would prefer you put last week's date before you write that contract, because it's going to show that you did not have any kind of written agreement to justify that contract.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. And then also, please get into the habit of using CB01, which is the consumer brochure. That talks about all types of agencies we have in Georgia. You can hand that to your client before you have the brokerage agreement signed to let them know. It says right at the top, the state law, Bretta says, I must have a written agreement to work with you. How would you like to work with me? And by the way, I can fire you just like you can fire me. If I'm not delivering on the value that I've given you, you have the right to fire me, just as I have the right to fire you if you are not doing what I've asked of you. That's why you have to have a good presentation, a buyer plan, a seller plan, and you need to understand how to deliver that so that they understand what they're getting into. I trust me now that everything is out in the news and in the magazines and whatever people are getting their information about real estate, they know that they may have to pay you, and the sellers know they don't technically have to pay you or offer a compensation. So you need to be ready. All right, number 2, compensation must be specific and cannot be open-ended. You cannot say broker may receive whatever amount the seller or seller's broker is willing to pay. So if you're filling out your brokerage engagement, and in the section that we'll see in a few minutes where they're talking about the compensation amount and so on and so forth, sometimes you guys like to put TBD. We tell you can't put TBD. Every blank has to be filled in, or it has to say NA. Well, you can't say, oh, and by the way, I don't know what we're going to get, so I'm going to cover myself by saying, I'll just put whatever is going to be paid. That's what I'm going to get. You cannot do that. There has to be a dollar amount. My suggestion is put as much as possible. If you're used to putting, 3% or something like that, you may want to consider doing 4 or 5, because you can't go back. Okay. You can't go back and increase it. If you put 3, and you really are trying to get 4, you can't go back. Whatever you agree to, the buyer is now in a position to approve what you're getting if you get commission from the seller, and if they're required to give you commission, depending on how, or compensation, depending on how you present this. So you have to be specific about the amount. You cannot put a "we'll decide later," or "we'll see what you buy," or "how much you buy." Nope. You've got to be able to have that consultation, explain your value, and put that number in by having that discussion with your buyer. Clear as mud? Number 3, the compensation must be approved by the party with whom real estate professional is working. I just mentioned that. So there was a time when I started in 96 that the commission paragraph was in the body of the contract. And maybe about 10 years later, it was removed, because you know why it was removed. When a closing was going sideways and everyone couldn't figure out how to pay for it, they would look at the compensation section or the commission section and say, well, you're getting X% or whatever it is. Why don't you chip in $1,000 or so? It always happened. So now that was removed, and that's when the instructions to the closing attorney was created. Okay, and we still have that. So now it really didn't go to the buyer. It was between the seller, the seller's broker, and the buyer's broker as to what was on that form. And the buyer had no say. Buyer had no idea what you were being paid. Okay, and then a lot of that came out in that NAR settlement. Why do I have to pay this? And I don't even know what my buyer made until closing, and so on and so forth. We won't dredge that up, but that's kind of where this is heading, or where it is headed now. So number 4 says no. Number 4 of the 5 keys is no realtor-owned MLS may include any information regarding compensation. That would be you. You will notice, I think it's going to happen probably sometime in August. I did go into FMLS and Georgia MLS to see what's going on as far as what people are putting in and things of that nature. Regarding the NAR case ruling, anywhere that a listing is advertised will not show compensation. Now, I'm not going to get into the weeds in this hour call, because I'm going to give you a chance to ask questions and things of that nature. But some of the classes and ideas that came about, if it links back to FMLS or MLS, or shows any indication of FMLS or Georgia MLS, you cannot show compensation. So for those of you that think you're going to have a link from something, for instance, your website where your IDX is feeding, that has compensation. You can't put compensation on the MLS. So you have to either have a separate website, or a sign writer, e-blast. If you remember IVR, when we used to do 800 numbers, press 1 for this information, press 2. We're taking it back to old school. You're going to have to get a little creative on how you let an agent know that you are buyer agent friendly. Okay, but you will not be able to put it on your listing, not in private remarks. You can't upload it in instructions to the closing attorney, which is what I did, because I upload all of my documents to that a buyer's agent will need in order to make an offer, including my instructions to the closing attorney. So they would know this is the compensation. You just need to sign it. So I have a complete contract. Can't do that anymore. Okay. Now, the problem with the lawsuit, some of those states were realtor owned. FMLS and Georgia MLS are not realtor owned or board owned. We are not, we never have been. So some of the things you are hearing out there and maybe causing a little heartburn, you're getting yourself all riled up about nothing, because Georgia has always been protected that way by our GAR contracts. So FMLS, what they have told me, I called them last week, what they've told me is the same thing that I was able to get from their website, from the FMLS website, that they're fully aware of what's going on. They haven't made a decision on how they're going to do things, but more than likely, be prepared that they're probably going to follow suit with everyone else and not show any compensation. So just be prepared that that's probably the route we're taking. Okay, everybody clear as mud on that? All right. So the most significant change in the NAR settlement is that Realtor Multiple Listing Services no longer will be able to publish commissions being offered to buyer brokers. FMLS and several multiple listing services in Georgia are not realtor owned. I just told you that. All right. So these are live examples of what is happening today in FMLS. I pulled up one. The commission is 2.25. I pulled up another one, 0. I pulled up another one, 0. This one over here, I think, let me move this. I've got this in my way. $500. And I believe the agent that did 20% needs to go back and check their listing, because I think that, because the price of the house and then 20% commission, if that person doesn't figure that that is incorrect real soon, that's going to be an argument right there. Anybody agree with me? Or are you guys giving 20% commissions?
Haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to show,
So
I want to show
these
that
are,
house.
yeah, these are live. I've protected all the innocent by not showing names and addresses, but these are live broker compensations that I plucked from just some random listings. And when I saw this one at 20%, I said, I have to put this on here, because somebody probably really meant to put 2 and they put 20.
Yeah. Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Back to the BBA, if you put 3%, and your client agrees to it, you cannot go above that. What if you run
Correct.
into a situation where the seller is offering a buyer broker bonus? How does that?
You would have, I'm going to show you what you do to, for lack of a better word, I'll use the language we all understand, kind of amend the situation.
Okay.
But here's what the reality is in some of the classes I took, because this question came up from a lot of people. If you and I both know, if the seller is going to offer something, the buyer is going to try to get it, because the buyer has to approve it.
Wow.
And so what was suggested is there may be situations where you say, let's split it, but the buyer is going to have a say whether you get a bonus or not.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah.
Well,
So
wow.
if the builder is giving you a trip to Hawaii and a BMW for a year lease, you're probably gonna have to split that between the buyer or take them to Hawaii with you. But, I joke about that, but the way we've done business before, you're gonna have to rethink it. Yeah. All right. Any other, that was an excellent question, by the way. By the way, I was on the very first class for this, and I take a lot of classes. This was the first time chat never stopped. What I mean by that is, while the instructor was talking, there were so many questions and so many, that's crazy. I can't believe that. This is going to take some getting used to, you guys. But I promise you, just like when the internet started in 96, when I started, that was going to replace us and no one would work with us and they could do this, that, and the other. This too shall pass. The way that it will pass is that you have a value, you know how to communicate it, and you understand the contracts. I have not had anyone push back on me on compensating the buyer's brokerage. Okay, so just, you know, suit up, get very intelligent about this, and I don't think you'll have that problem. We will get past this. It's just change. That's all it is. Okay. And for those that don't, you know, it happens every so many years when we do something different that a person just can't sustain it, and they get out of the business. And I'm not encouraging anyone to get out of the business, but if you don't put the work in, that's what's really going to happen. All right. One of the things that every brokerage engagement says, that's the buyer brokerage, the seller, the tenant, all of these things that I'm about to tell you that have anything to do with the brokerage engagement will be similar. The state law, did you hear what I just said? The state law, this is not Keller Williams law, your law, the region's law, international's law, the state law prohibits a broker from representing a buyer as a client without first entering into a written agreement with the buyer under OCGA, which is our BRETA. So if you're having a hard time communicating this, you can show them this contract to say, look, I'm not making this up. This is a change. You're fully aware because you told me you heard what was going on the news, and this is part of the change. And it's not really a change for us. It was always the law, but a lot of you were just waiting until you wrote the contract. Now you cannot do that. All right. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. Also, number 4. Now, number 3 is a little different, but I want to concentrate more on number 4. I don't know how that little, I think when that slide was made, that extra little thing was in there, so please ignore that. But the compensation for professional services, remember, that has been changed to be known as compensation. That compensation to broker is negotiable, is not set by the state law. However, this does not obligate an individual licensee and brokerage firm to necessarily negotiate their compensation. Let me tell you a little bit more about that statement. If your market center has a policy that you need, that we charge 3%, 4%, 6%, 5%, then that is okay. That's okay for a brokerage to say, our typical compensation is X. That's not saying that we are price fixing or anything like that. That's no different than if you walk into Target and they tell you the price is typically $10, but it's on sale today for $5. And after that sale, it goes back to 10. That's their typical price. So all I want you to understand is that you don't have to reduce your commission or your compensation if you don't want to, but the seller, the buyers can negotiate. And that has always been, all our GAR committee did was make it clear, crystal clear. Okay? Any questions, comments about that? So in the handout, you have what's called a pre-showing compensation agreement. They changed the name of it. I'd have to go back and look at the old form to tell you what it was called before. We have always had this form. And what this form 258 said in the past is, say for instance, because if anybody's on here that does commercial, or if you have ever co-op with someone commercial before, you usually don't know what the compensation is. You usually have to call that commercial agent to find out what it is. They basically have turned us into operating the same way. So before you go and show a property, say you're going out Saturday and you're going to show 10 properties, yeah, it's a little bit of extra work, but that's why we get compensated for work. You're going to call those properties and say, hey, I wanted to know what the compensation is, or you can send this form over. And so that way, when you're having a buyer consultation, and maybe your buyer says, you know what, don't show me anything. I'm just barely bringing a down payment and, all the other cost of closing this sale with me. I would prefer you to be paid by the seller. So we have a special stip for that, that if that buyer says, I want you to be paid by the seller, not by me, there is a special stip for that. If they say, I don't want to see anything unless it has compensation, then you want to make sure you use this pre-showing compensation agreement on everything you send over to those agents. And let me just say this, if you're a listing agent, pick up your phone. If you're a listing agent, answer your text. These days of not answering and you can't get the agent, that has got to stop, because that's how we're going to find out whether there's compensation. If we have agents that are not going to answer their phone, that's going to be a problem. And if you're the listing agent, that's a problem for your seller, wondering why no one's coming to look at their house because they don't know the details of the house. And especially if they have a directive from the buyer, don't show me anything, and they're trying to get that answered. So I know no Keller Williams agent on this call would do that, but maybe tell somebody else that they need to do that if they think that that's a strategy. It's not, because it's going to be very important for people to answer their phone now so you can get all the details. So then when you get that information, that person may tell you, no, we're not going to be giving any compensation to the buyer's brokerage. And then you would have to let that buyer know, we, per your request, I'm not going to be able to show this, or we revert back to the buyer's agreement where you have agreed to pay me whatever that number is. Is everybody clear on this? What can I answer on this page?
Deborah,
Nothing?
question.
Say it a little loud. I can't hear you too well.
Is that better?
Not really, but go ahead.
Okay, if it's not too good, I'll put it in the chat, okay?
Oh, I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Okay, so what if originally the buyer said that they didn't want to pay any compensation, and then they really want to see this property, and it comes back and it says that the seller's not paying any compensation? Can they amend the agreement at that time that they will now pay some compensation?
Yes, yes. And I'll
Okay,
show you how you're going to do that. That's the next forms.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And by the way, Barbara, let's give her some love, because she's part of that contract committee, and she knows, she goes to a lot of the big GAR and NAR events, and I stay in contact with her to find out what's great, what's good, bad, and ugly. And so, Barbara, I thank you so much for your service to us and keeping us informed.
My pleasure. Thank you, Deborah.
You're welcome. All right. Any other questions about this form before I go to the next?
Just
All
for
right.
for clarification, this form is the listing agent is filling this out, right? Because it's explaining the compensation on the
This
listing.
is no. So if you're working with a buyer and you want to know, now, if a listing agent could fill this out, but they cannot put it on FMLS or Georgia MLS. What they could do, and one of the things I'm going to do, and this is, I'm just R&Ding this, ripping it off from somebody else, if that makes sense. Some people are going to have a page on their website, not on the IDX page, but a separate tab that says CR compensation. Some people are getting domains, co-op with us, and you can go to that site and look at 123 Main Street, offer compensation. You're going to have to get clever. So when a listing agent fills this out, they're basically sending this back to you to say, yes, we have compensation, here it is.
Okay.
Is that clear?
But
You, the buyer
and this,
brokerage, the reason I'm talking from the broker side is because you need to find out, and you could use this form to find out. If you don't hear back from the agent, then you may fill this out, or, the only thing you're going to be able to do is send it over. The second page of this is just signatures, but you'll send it over before you go and show property. But if you're a listing agent, it would be a good practice to have this filled out already. So when someone calls, you can send it to them, or if you have an IVR, what used to be called IVR, you can load it into your IVR and say, hi, I'm Deborah. Thank you for looking at 123 Main Street. Press 1 for your pre-showing compensation agreement. Yes, you can hire me out to do your voiceovers. Just joking. I'm expensive. All right. So
Quick
that's
question,
Form
please.
259. Go ahead.
Quick question. Is this good for Facebook?
Yes. Yes, you could do
Okay.
that. You could do that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really mostly for us, but you could send that to them to see if they're willing. A lot of times, if you're prospecting FSBOs or knocking on their door, they're going to tell you, I don't really want to pay, or they will say, I don't want to list, but if you pay, I'll pay a buyer broker 3% or whatever number they give you. So now you know what the pre-agreement is going to be. This agreement should not be used if the broker's compensation and the party or broker paying it have already been agreed to in a separate written agreement and it's not being modified. Okay, so that this form we're talking about, you don't know what it is. If you already know what it is, you don't have to use 259. Okay, this is a new form. So we've had Form 258, and now we have Form 259. And this is what it looks like, the brokerage compensation agreement. So you're going to fill out the top part, which is the property. And then number 1, what I've highlighted says compensation offered to buyer's broker. So then it says right below that, compensation of the buyer, blank percent or dollar amount or other. And then the compensation of the buyer's broker shall be paid by who's paying it? Buyer, seller, who's paying it? And then the second part says compensation of the seller's broker. Okay, that's the listing. What percentage and what are they paying? Is everybody clear? Because you normally, let me bring it down to its simplest format. The reason you have this form is because we used to be able to just go to FMLS and Georgia MLS and say, yep, that's what they're giving me. We're not going to have that. So this is the way to find it and solidify it. And the second page to this is a signature. You have the full form. So that's agreed. Is everybody with me? Did I lose anyone? I love this. That means I'm explaining this well. Or either you're like confused and don't want to say anything.
Yeah, I
Talk
don't
to
know if
me.
you lost me or I'm not sure. So I'm gonna, is this gonna be part of any
So
offer?
talk to me because this is your call, not mine.
Yeah, is this part of it? So this is a new exhibit that's gonna be part of any offer, or is this before you do an offer?
Yes. Yes, it's an exhibit to your offer because you have exhibits before your binding. You have amendments after your binding.
Sure. Okay. But so this isn't to figure it out before it's part of the offer. That other form was to figure it
So the other form 258 is to figure it out.
out. Okay.
259 is to solidify it. Everybody with me? Figure it out,
Yes, and this
solidify
is
it.
not now, right? This is not required now in August.
You don't have this in your contracts yet. It won't happen until July 1st.
Okay.
July 1st, this is the way you will prepare offers moving forward.
I thought it was
Will this
August 17th.
will this replace the ICA? The instruction
They've
to close.
updated the ICA as well. Now the ICA, when do you think you'd use the ICA?
I usually use it when I submit an offer, but
Because you know what already.
the compensation.
That's right. So remember, when it's listed and compensation is offered, right now, you're still using the ICA. When they remove compensation, you're probably going to move towards this. And Barbara, chime in here. My guess, and Seth couldn't really answer this either. My guess is that the ICA might go away.
We're not sure yet. We're still talking about.
Okay, yeah. My guess is because
It's
you hear
redundant.
this question, Barbara? Right, thank you. I was just about to tell Barbara because it's confusing and it's redundant because why do I need to do we did an ICA because we knew what the compensation was going to be and we filled out that form appropriately. You know, maybe you didn't know what the other agent was getting, but if I saw 3, I put 6 as total gross and 3 to me if I'm the buyer broker and moved on. If they were not getting 3, then they knew to correct and would send it back to you for initial change or something like that.
But I also
So
noticed,
let me say it one more. Go ahead.
yeah, in the ICS, some agents, they put their transaction coordinator fee. This one does not have this place. Correct? For
Right.
instruction to closing.
That's
attorney.
correct.
Mhm.
Correct.
Deborah, send me an
Okay.
email with that so I can take it to the next meeting.
Okay, I'll do that. Let me make a note.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Good question. See, I knew you were too quiet. And there's no shame here. There's no, this is for your knowledge, and it's only a sneak peek. You need to get into any and every contract class you can if you have to take it more than once to hear it from different people and different perspectives and people that are, already preparing. So if you aren't preparing for this, you're already behind the 8 ball as far as I'm concerned, because people have already gotten domains and websites and I'm dusting off my IVR 800 number. Okay. I'm buying riders to go on my sign saying, we're broken. What am I thinking of that? More than likely, if I'm saying that on my listing, that means I'm offering you some kind of compensation. We're going to have to get creative, but you cannot attach it to FMLS, Georgia MLS, KWLS, IMLS, none of those LSs. Okay. So start thinking about that. This is mid-year. You should be dusting off your business plan and checking it out and figuring out what works, what doesn't work. I'm having to look at some of the systems that we have that I've got to tweak a little bit to accommodate these changes. Now, a few weeks ago, last month, I think it was, this touring agreement came out by Zillow, and I read it and thought, what the what? That doesn't make any sense. But acknowledges that there is as being represented, but there's nowhere in here about compensation for me taking you to look at a house. Why would we do that? We are in the business of selling homes and being compensated. So I'm not quite sure why Zillow decided to do this. So I'm not an attorney. I just play one on TV. So I contacted one of my favorite attorneys, and this is the response she came back with. Now, I'll paraphrase this while you're reading it, but basically, she was saying the same thing I thought when I read this. Why would I do a touring agreement? And as a matter of fact, the class I went to a week or so ago, that attorney said the same thing. He said, why would anybody sign this? Why would anybody do this? Yeah, this was back in this dated May 1st was when that Zillow thing came out, and I called her and I said, I'm going to send this to you. Can you tell me how I would position this with the agents, or why I would position this with the agents? And this was her response. What's better is what she's saying at the very last line. A BBA is better, which is the buyer brokerage engagement or agreement. Any questions there? And you have that in your handout. And so when she said that to me, I said, boom. All right. Now, when you're a listing agent, I hope that when you go on appointments and when you get offers on your listings, you're doing a seller net sheet. But here's a buyer's net sheet that's always been there for years. And I guarantee you, some of you either didn't know it was there or you've never used it. I would get up close and personal with this form. I haphazardly use this. I mostly use my seller net sheet regularly because I'm more of a listing agent. However, this will be part of our team's arsenal moving forward. So when we have our CITO, we call CITO come into the office consultation, and they've been pre-qualified or pre-approved, or maybe nothing yet. They're just talking and we're figuring out what we need to do next. When I present my buyer brokerage, I think someone had in the chat, how would I present this as a buyer versus a customer? All right. First of all, by state law, you show them agency. You tell them about agency, and you can do that by using the CB01, the ABCs of agency. You then want to say, I must have a written agreement before we can start working together. And with the new rules, in some cases, the seller will not be offering compensation as you know it from before. All right. Now, if this is someone who's from California, New York, places like that, they may be familiar with already paying their buyer. But most states are looking at compensation co-op that the seller typically offered. So then I might say, let's play with some numbers in the event that you have to pay my compensation. So in this illustration, let's pretend this person is buying a house, and I might have their letter from the lender with their cost, and I can transfer it to this form. Or if you guys remember how to calculate this from pre-license, you could do this. If not, I think I've been asked to teach the net sheets in the market center. I don't know why I'll be doing that, but when you do them on Remind, they auto-populate. When you do them anywhere else, you have to use your knuckles, your fingers, toes, and calculator. Okay. So I would put in like a guesstimate of down payment, maybe some closing costs, or I might say, maybe I'm able to negotiate all or some of your closing costs. I just go in and look at the taxes. I know sometimes that information is not 100% accurate in our Realist or our CRS in Georgia MLS. The best way to find out the most accurate tax is whatever county you're writing on, go Cobb. I live in Cobb County Tax Assessor's Office, Fulton County Tax Assessor's Office, so on and so forth. And you'll go to properties and you'll type in their address, or you'll type in the tax ID number, and their tax bill, because that's public record, will pop up. If you're a listing agent, it's a very good practice to make sure if they haven't paid their taxes, you can remind them that that's going to affect their net. Okay, so just remember that. And usually that happens around September, October, when our tax bills are due and paid. And someone will say, well, my mortgage company already paid it. Well, a closing attorney may not know that, and they may try to take that again. So that's a whole different conversation when we get into fourth quarter. But this is basically what I would suggest you do. If it has a homeowners association, you want to put, that type of information. If there's some repairs that need to be made that you guys are talking about at the table, you put that in. But the most important, you see number 17 where it says brokerage commission. And you said, you know what, if you buy a house from me at XYZ, and in this example, it's 250,000. If you see right here at the top of the page where the name and address and everything, it says loan amount or sales price. I said 250, I'm at 725. So 725 is their purchase price. Then commission would be somewhere around, or compensation would be somewhere around 21,000. And they might look at you and go, okay, I can do that. Or can we get the seller to pay that? Why, yes, we can get the seller to pay that. Are you asking me to ask the seller? Yes, I am. Great. I'll add the special stip in our offer that the buyer is requesting the seller to pay my compensation and whatever that amount is. Everyone following me so far? Let me check my comments and see. Oops. See, I can't work this. I normally have a mouse, and my laptop is the touch thing, so my touch is too heavy. All right. Then you add and subtract and so on and so forth. And at the bottom, it says total estimate of cost to the buyer. I would highlight that and circle it and say, this is what your potential out-of-pocket, we call it closing cost, but I don't like to say closing cost, your total cost to close the transaction. Because what does that include? That includes appraisal, inspections, my compensation. And if you can do that, then we can look at every and anything. You just got a presentation. Did anybody pick up what I was throwing out? No?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
All right. So what questions do you have about this? And then the bottom part, as far as what their monthly payment would be, I just know how to calculate that stuff, but you may have that information from the lender. So for those of you that are newer in the business, or maybe you're seasoned and you have this practice of letting the loan officer do all the talking, I'm not asking you to be a loan officer, but I'm asking you to be a little more savvy, because the loan officer is not going to mention your compensation. They're only going to give them a TILA. Everybody knows what a TILA is, their truth in lending. They're going to give them that saying, you know, if you can, here's your total cost to close this loan out. And if your agent can negotiate closing costs for you, that would be great. You're going to have to get better at calling the loan officer. I don't know if you're not doing this, but I do this on every offer sent to me on my listing. Hi, this is Deborah with Keller Williams. I see that you have pre-qualified Mary Smith for a conventional loan. I want to make sure that you've pulled all verifications and credit reports and verified the income in order to buy the 725 house. Did anybody pick up what I was just throwing out? Presentation. They answer the question. If anybody tells you I can't tell you that, please point to the purchase and sale agreement where it says that the seller has the right to call and verify that you can buy their house. Stop letting agents that don't go to contract classes or stay on top of their game at a broker chat, or right after this, a 1 hour contract class with our other brokers, how to conduct themselves.
And Deborah, can I just add something?
Please do, because I'll start preaching.
And I'm in the amen corner. So, and pay attention to what Deborah said, because now you can call and ask that information. Now, they cannot tell you the dollar amount that's in the person's account and so on
Right.
and so forth. They cannot give away their confidential information, but they can answer those questions there. Did you collect their documents? Or do they have the funds today ready to close? You can ask those questions right there, but they cannot give away their
That's right.
confidential information.
That's true. And it's very important with a buyer. What if the buyer has to pay your compensation? One of the most popular questions on the class, what if the buyer doesn't have the money at closing? Well, shame on you. You didn't verify with the lender to say, look, this buyer said that they could pay my compensation of $21,000 should the seller decide not to pay. Do they have enough funds to pay their down payment, closing costs if they have to? I'm going to try to negotiate hard, but if they don't have it and have my compensation, yes, they do. See, if you don't do your due diligence, you remind your buyers to do due diligence, but you have to do yours as well. If it's cash, then what you want to do, to piggyback what Barbara just said, you would call the bank or the money market account or whatever they're showing you as far as where those funds are coming from. And you can ask for the branch manager to say, I'm Deborah Blue with Keller Williams. I have a cash buyer for a real estate transaction. They have indicated that they have $500,000. I've been given a letter that they have $500,000 in this account in order to close this transaction. As Barbara said, they can't give out credit scores and social security numbers and so on and so forth, but they can say, yes, at this time they have that money. Now, you and I both know somebody could go out and buy a plane or whatever. I don't know what planes cost, but and deplete that. And that's a whole different conversation and lawsuit. But at the end of the day, that's your job to make sure, should they be getting in my car and should I be showing them anything if they don't have all the funds? I foresee the problem, or I'm not going to call it a problem, the challenge in this new world real estate 3.0 is that a buyer will say, yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll pay you. And you haven't verified that they can even pay you. And then you get to closing and you can't, they can't pay you. That's a lawsuit. That's not a reason to stop the closing. You can try, but it's not a reason to stop the closing. Now, I'll piggyback on this a little bit because it just happened a week ago. VA, for the longest, we were waiting to see what they would do. They have taken and they have a temporary lift on their VA buyers to pay us. Before, if you had a VA client, they cannot pay our compensation at all. But now that's been lifted. How long it will be, how it will be, all of that, I don't know. I don't think any of us know. So when we say we don't know, is we don't know because we, don't have an answer, but really that's what it is. We don't have an answer. All of this is still kind of tweaking along the way. So I heard someone ask me about August 17th and July 1st. The contracts go into effect July 1st. You will start practicing this July 1st because of the contracts. NAR's final everything happens August 17th for them. And mainly because there are other states that don't have the beautiful GAR contracts that we have. So NAR is for everyone. July 1st is for Georgia. So you're going to be practicing way before a lot of your colleagues throughout the United States. Clear as mud, everybody? Oops, I'm going the wrong way.
Before you go, Deborah, I would like to get the information on that panel you're gonna be on tomorrow, okay?
On the what now?
Panel.
Oh, the class at Midtown is from 10 to 1 in our training room. We just got a new training room. It was widened and everything, so we're very excited about it. We had our first meeting in it last Tuesday, and it's really nice. So we got plenty of room for people to come, and it will be on Zoom. So if you aren't able to physically come to our market center, you can call the front desk or Raven over at our market center, and she can get you on the Zoom.
Thank you.
I just show up. I don't I don't do anything else. I can't believe it. I'm out of town and I'm heading back to Atlanta tonight. And I had to jerry rig for you guys today to be here because I stick to my commitments. And we finished almost 10 minutes early. I can't believe it. We never finish early. What time is it? 12:53. You've got 7 minutes to ask me questions.
Hey, Deborah, thank you so much. This info has been amazing. I was just going to add, there also is, again, go to as many of these classes as you can. On Friday, we're having a class here in Decatur with Missy
Perfect.
from Fryer, and it's a free 3-hour C. If you haven't made it, you need a place
Which
to do it.
office? Tell me again.
Decatur, here in Decatur, the Metro.
Okay, Decatur.
Yeah.
I'm typing it in the chat. Decatur, what time?
Actually, I just put it in right now. So, yep.
Oh, you
There
put
it
it
is.
in there so everybody
Yep.
can, yeah, you don't
There
have
it
to,
is.
you don't have to just stick to Midtown, Decatur. Get as much, if you come to Midtown and then go to Decatur or go to Decatur and then come to Midtown. I've taken it twice now. I plan on
Yep.
taking a third time because this is evolving and you do not want to get in trouble. Okay. There's a
Yep.
couple of things I didn't talk about in this that we need to, but I need to do that in the longer class. I can't do that in the hour.
Yep, for sure. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you, guys. I was, I don't get nervous, but I was nervous about explaining this because after going to that class and that chat was going crazy, I'm like, well, what are they not getting? Because I'm getting it. And everyone was just confused. So I think I
Deborah?
break things down is what it is. And I don't think some people teaching this, we're not breaking it down. And we're adult learners. We're thinking about the groceries, the kids, and everything else. We got to have people give it to us simple, stupid.
Deborah, I have a question.
Sure.
From a compliance standpoint, is this stuff going to go into effect? Contracts written, dated
July
January
1st. Yes,
So
July 1st.
no, none of this will apply to retroactive contracts.
No.
Okay.
July 1st. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for asking that. So if you're in another market center, you want to check with your compliance to see, how they're going to handle it in your particular office in Midtown. Darcy is our compliance, and to keep things simple, it will go into effect July 1st. So she will be looking for people to have a buyer brokerage engagement in the command system, June 17th, and then they wrote a contract June 19th. Otherwise, your check is going to be in check jail. Okay. Any other questions? You guys did good. Either I did a good job or you already understand it or you're more confused. I don't want you to be more confused.
You did a great job.
I just want you guys to be good and shine. So let me know. You see my information right here. That's my broker email. Don't send it to my FMLS email that goes to my team. And of course, you all have your own people to go to in your market centers if you're from a different market center. I thank you so much. Go out there, be great, write some contracts, and I'll see Midtown tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Deborah.
Bye.
Thank you.